is Agatha Jackson. She is a self-shooting researcher, would you say?
Yeah.
Off the fence. The kind of purpose for this masterclass is just to kind of chat to someone that's not at the complete top of the game, that is the CEO of Plimsoll or whatever, and is someone that's actually a much more applicable role that we might be looking for when we get into the industry. And she's done some online stuff in the past about how to get in. She's done some sort of YouTube tutorials, but she's got a really nice story of how she kind of got her job at the moment. And she's going to kind of tell us a little bit about what she does at Off the Fence. And then I've got a number of questions that we're going to go through, that everyone feel free to just jump in and have a cool chat about it. So welcome to the chat.
Yes, hi everyone. I was just saying to Duncan that it's all great. I mean, obviously, like me and my friends, colleagues, we are looking to speak to the people higher up and all that. But as I was telling him a story about one exec at work, these people have like joined the industry when the reality of the industry was completely different and than it is now. And so the competition was much lower, and it just obviously the number of companies was much lower as well. And the exec from work on the staff party, we were just having a chat. She asked about my age, and then she said, "Oh, when I was your age, I was a series producer." I was like, "Okay." So I work at Off the Fence, and I'm a shooting researcher, and I'm definitely loving where I am right now. And I would say that I have found the company that, I've always wanted to find a company that wants to nurture you. And in this industry, it's very much it's quite frequently a contract-based work. So usually people would say that if you get a 6-month contract, you're really lucky. So it can be anything from a few weeks to a couple of months to 6 months to a year, or you can be staff. So yeah.
Cool. So we'll get through onto our questions. And like I said before, everyone feel free to just jump in if they have anything in particular to ask about. But the first question I have here is, what did you prioritize when searching for work initially in natural history?
Yes, I'm going to go off my points that I've listed myself before when I received the questions from Duncan. So when I was looking for work in natural history, so it all started with me meeting a producer on a paddleboarding session, and someone said, "Oh, you should speak to that guy. He works in the BBC, and it sounds like he's doing what you want to do." So I met him, and he told me a bit about how he started. He actually told me about your course, guys. He said, "Oh, Salford's got a really good course." Obviously, he told me about the UE course and just some other bits. At the time, I was working as a waitress in hospitality. So I did my undergrad in media and journalism. And I didn't do my master's at the time. I'm actually doing my master's part-time now as I'm working. And so I didn't have any science background, and people from the get-go were quite specific that for the natural history filmmaking, for the wildlife filmmaking, you really need the scientific background in something like zoology or biology. I don't know whether you guys come from that kind of background or not. So especially people in the BBC, and as I've spoken to the talent manager, were quite persistent about this biology, zoology thing. But then in the indies and on different festivals, people were talking more and more about the industry transitioning from that typical scientific thing and just describing the animal behavior to more of a storytelling, and obviously they were looking for more of a people with that storytelling background and things like that. And so you can see that transition in things like, for example, Icon is making like The Savage Kingdom. All of that is all about the drama and the story, the character building and all of that. So it's definitely changing. So perhaps if you've got that strongly scientific background, then perhaps you should focus on sort of building up your storytelling skills. And then if you're on the flip side like me, that you come from a storytelling background, then you should perhaps work on your scientific skills. So this is something that I was obviously thinking about. I was thinking about for a long time. I was just doing like little lectures here and there, and then finally decided that probably more for my own sake rather than the industry's sake, I signed up to do a master's in ecology, just because I also came to some realizations about the industry and how little space there is for conservation message in actually natural history filmmaking. And I was just toying between whether I want to stay in TV or whether I actually want to go into conservation work. So at the very beginning, when I was working as a waitress, it was pure luck. The restaurant that I was working in was hosting at the time the Natural History Network's networking mornings. And when I heard about it, I was like, oh yeah, put me on the shift then. And it was just obviously when you work in the hospitality, you're working your evening shifts, and the networking meeting is like 7 till 9. So that was quite funny. But yeah, I've done it, and I met some people there. And I know we'll go to that question later on, whether it's worth joining the Natural History network. It was good for me at the time. It allowed me to meet some people, to just generally fuel my excitement about the industry. What else? Obviously, I was looking for, so I probably learned there or somewhere about the work experience schemes that Icon and Films at 59 or other companies are doing. I obviously prepared my CV. I was looking for different tips. Obviously, people say make it stand out. So I made it all colorful and stuff like this. I stuck my photo on it. And then I heard last week from my very top boss, head of production, we had our like catch-ups on Friday. And she said, I hate when people put photos on CV. So guys, don't make my mistake.
I was told that as well. I had my photo on my CV, and she said, it's a nice photo, but it's a big no-no.
Yeah. So it seems like a big faux pas to have a photo on a CV. You know, it's just people don't seem really keen on that. And yeah, I wonder whether that has, denied me some jobs. So what else? So work experience I was looking for. I found Icon and Films at 59 at the time. So I got through to Icon. So work experience is definitely something worth looking into. Another place is Babasa, which is this youth organization group that makes connections with these companies, like they did with Of the Fence, Plimsoll, and Icon, and they organize their own work experience placements or whatever. So it might be worth looking into Babasa, especially if you're perhaps from ethnic minority background. They're especially sort of trying to target the ethnic minorities and just enable the start in the industry. So Facebook pages, we've got, which I've learned, I can't remember when, Bristol Production Talent is probably the most important Facebook page that you might know about or not, but this is where majority of the jobs are being advertised on Facebook. And to be honest, I've been on places like the Talent Manager, and I've been sending just CVs over email, and it's definitely a good habit to send your CV, do a round of CVs around the companies every 6 months, and also just to remind about yourself, perhaps update them on what you've done on your experience. But Bristol Production Talent seems to be the page that advertises the most of the jobs. Then I would say the last of my 2 points are making your own films, and that's something that this producer that I met first, he said, I did this film about a snail, and then I took it to some producers and they loved it and they gave me a job. So it could be that, but definitely. And I know there's a question about showreel. You've got to show your initiative. And I think by making your own stuff and having something to show from the get-go, that's that. So I always encourage people to do something, and especially I know that you can just do a showreel, you can just go around and shoot some animals and then put that together into a showreel. But I guess if you do a film that also features your storytelling skills, which is obviously something that we discussed that's important, And then another upside to it is, you can, if it's really good, and even if it's not very good, you can enter it to festivals, and that's additional exposure for you. Festivals are something really good to look into, especially Wildscreen. Obviously this year it's not happening, but that's where, you should also look into perhaps volunteering on Wildscreen, and that's the way to meet a lot of people, almost all, like the whole Bristol, and apart from the Bristol is like also the States, and people from Europe are coming down and obviously enjoying the festival and listening to different masterclasses, and obviously mingle and meet and all of that. So definitely, I would say probably volunteering on Wildscreen is the most accessible way, because obviously tickets are 400 quid. So perhaps for students they're like half price, but still, volunteering is probably the best thing to consider. And finally, something that they told us on different courses that we've done is find your niche. What makes you special? Why would they want to employ you specifically? Is it that you have a drone license? Is it that you're a mountain climber? Is it that you've got diving certificate? Is it that you speak 1 or 2 or 3 languages? So it's definitely having that extra skill that will make you, and I've been told, I've done my drone license not so long ago, but I've had drone before, but obviously drone license is it's this enabler, and I've had so many, well, not so many, but I've had a few interviews where for a role of a runner or a junior researcher, they asked whether I operated a drone. So obviously it's the cheaper productions like the One Show, like the Countryfile Diaries or Countryfile, they will want people who can multitask and do a lot of things like this. Actually going towards that as well, sound operating. Sound is quite important, because before you might go and do a second camera or whatever, they might want you to do the sound. And for example, BBC was really good because they provided the training for it, but it would be good to have some background and some experience with it previously. So you might be a runner, or you might be a junior researcher, and you might just be going on shoots doing sound. But I've heard that from quite a few people that sound is a good thing to know and to have.
We've just got a question on the chat from Hugh saying, should we bring these niche skills up in interviews, or should we just put them on our CV?
Both. So have them on CVs, and I've done a CV clinic with the BBC a few years ago, and they said like languages are so important, and all of these skills are so important. So have them somewhere at the top of your CV, so that your education can go probably somewhere lower down, but make sure that your skills are somewhere higher up. So definitely, and obviously talk about them on the interview as well.
I think in Hugh's scenario, you're much more of a sound guy. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah, there's other stuff, I like with rock climbing, I'm a jack of all trades.
Yeah, it's good to be a jack of all trades. Apparently, because the productions are becoming cheaper and cheaper, I think people are looking more. So the reality used to be that people are trained and qualified in these like individual skill sets, and so you have camera operators, and then you've got sound operators, and then you've got directors. Now it's all together, all in one. You are a self-shooting producer, director, you write a script, you get your camera on your shoulder, and then I did a one-show shoot with a colleague who is a self-shooting AP, and basically she was directing, having her camera, I was just doing the boom pole behind her, and that was the shoot, just us two. So
cool, thank you very much.
No worries. So I think we've got the first question covered.
Very much so. That was a great answer to the first question. We've got a long way to go. But I'm loving it. Thank you very much. So the next question is, how much did you rely upon your network for help along the way?
Yeah, so I don't think very much. So the 3 points that I have written down is obviously that how you rely upon your network is that you get the tips and advice on what's like, especially at the beginning you get the tips, and then as you go further you rely on recommendations, and recommendations are everything. And obviously if that's how you can. I've seen my friends get a job like this is because her previous boss recommended her to someone else in the industry, and that's how she got a job. I probably believe that this played a role in me getting a job at Of Defence. So that would be the most important thing. Obviously, make sure you come across well at your workplace, you leave a good impression, and obviously you can count for recommendation. And I guess this is where networking comes to play as well, is you know the people, you maintain the regular social contact with them, and then they are more, especially when you're not just colleagues, I guess when you're more friendly with people, then you leave a even longer lasting impression, and then people are more likely to recommend, they might know 2 people, but it might be the one that they're more friendly with that they will end up recommending, things like that. But the network, help from the network. If you work for a company and if you're a foreigner, I don't know whether there are any people that are outside of Europe. That potentially will become a problem for even Europeans after Brexit. But obviously there's this whole aspect of visas. If you do well in at your workplace, then obviously they will sponsor you if they need you. So if, for example, you're I don't know, I had friends from India or from South America, and obviously they were useful for the company because of their language skills. So the company decided to sponsor the visa for them. So that's another way of support.
Drawing on from that, we spoke a bit about how you were waitressing at the venue that had the Natural History Network there.
That's right.
And you said that helped you quite a bit. How would you make efforts to meet people face to face when looking for work? Like, a lot of us at the moment are sending emails and CVs, and it's one thing being a CV with an email, but it's another thing to FaceTime like we're doing now, or chat in person. So any sort of insights? Yeah,
so I think when I read this question, is the only thing that stood out to me is, would you make efforts to meet people face to face when looking for work? It's the when looking for work that I've got a problem with. Is if you go and intentionally try and meet people with only having that intention of looking for work, then it might not necessarily bring you the results that you're looking for. So I would think about it as, I want to first build the relationships with people, and then they might benefit in me finding work through them. Because if you just go and try and meet people and assume that this is all purely for you to find job, I definitely had that conviction that I'm going there and I'm going to meet someone and they're going to offer me a job, and then you come as this very intense person that people don't necessarily want to speak to because you come across needy, and and people don't necessarily have, there's a fraction of people that can actually offer you a job. You'll meet other people who are perhaps camera operators, sound recorders, who are, I don't know, heads of production development, whatever. And that's how you build your network, and that's how maybe at some point in the future someone will remember you, offer you a job. That's what will become useful when you're perhaps a researcher and you need to recommend a camera operator who has done that kind of work or this kind of work, or So I would say definitely put an effort into networking, especially at first, just to build up the knowledge of the people around the industry. But I wouldn't say go and meet people with the intention of trying to get a job from them.
We got a question from Eleanor that's just asked you, what's your ultimate career goal?
Hey, Eleanor. So it's funny because I guess maybe it's a good time to speak about managing your expectations. So when I was trying to enter the industry, I think people have this great dreams of, it's going to be amazing, I'm going to travel around the world and I'm going to, just film animals and it's going to be amazing. I think we get that impression from all these big productions like Planet Earth or Blue Planet or whatever, and they are amazing. Also, they are highly specified. So cameramen who are doing work with, a very specific type of animal, a very specific type of equipment, get to work on these projects. Also, people who have been in the BBC for years and years and years. I mean, I've seen on the most recent, I want to say Blue Planet 2, I've seen the name of a researcher who has been a researcher for the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. So I think it's all about managing your expectations. Also, like I would say that a bigger part of production, the natural history production, isn't that glamorous, going into fantastic, wonderful locations and filming these like unique places or animals or projects. I would say that a good portion of them are the so-called blue cheap productions, where the budget is very limited and you end up going to wildlife parks or or not necessarily, or you end up going because no one's got the budget to pay a cameraman to spend 3 weeks hoping to shoot a Siberian tiger which was spotted once in 2 years, so I think it's managing your expectations. And another thing is it depends if it's just your passion for the animal behavior and the natural world and just telling stories about that, that's great. So that's probably something that you will enjoy. I am definitely more passionate about conservation and the environmental crisis that our planet is going through. And there doesn't seem to be space for much of that content in television, which is predominantly ruled by the money, so the budget, and the entertainment. And apparently people do not want to hear about the crisis that we're in. So the commissioners do not want you to put that content in the film. So, and maybe, again, there is a question about this. Is it about luck? And I was going to say a lot about getting a job and getting the opportunity industry is about being in the right place and right time. And I'm truly hoping that me being at Of the Fence is that for me. Because I heard in 2018 on Wildscreen about this new project called Water Bear, which is basically like a Netflix VOD platform for basically conservation shorts. And so this was something that I was just absolutely in love with from the get-go, and I thought this is something that is exactly what I want to do and all of that. And the Water Bear platform comes under sort of the ownership in half of the Fence. They're based in Amsterdam, in their head office in Amsterdam. So my ultimate career goal, I'm still toying between whether I want to stay in filmmaking or whether I want to move into an actual hands-on conservation work to actually try and do something about the crisis that we're going through. But it seems like this platform is some middle ground, a good middle ground for me, having skills in camera operating and storytelling, yet being passionate about conservation. And it's anyway something that I do in my free time. I collaborate with NGOs and charities to help them create content about the projects that they undertake. So probably producing on that, and if that doesn't work out, then who knows, maybe I'll be somewhere in Africa just or in South America saving the planet one day.
You say there's not a huge demand for conservation films, but that could be a generational thing. I think the younger generation is very much like striving for meaningful change and stuff. So as they get older, sort of viewing needs might shift. So
yeah, older people I find really don't have that much motivation for like doing things for change.
If it's like shoved in a way that they can digest it, I think they'll definitely respond. So
yeah. Yeah, for sure. But also that comes with the fact that the format of TV as we know it is the format of TV for the older generation. So I think it's not going to happen for the older TV as we know it. It's going to be the VOD platforms like this. It's going to be Netflix, like where you obviously you can see that these things are trending. They just wouldn't be trending if you give them a slot and ask the whole nation to watch at once. So I think there is space for that content, but in a different format.
Yeah, for sure, I agree with you. Yeah.
There's actually quite a lot of study going into what I'm looking at the moment on, have you watched An Inconvenient Truth? It was the Al Gore climate change film.
No.
Anyways, it talks a lot about climate change, and people, when watching that film, have markedly changed mental states afterwards, that they feel less happy, less calm, more anxious. And I think going into it, like a lot of TV productions maybe just don't want to do that to their audience. And it could be have trouble with sort of conservation films. Like Our Planet did it after every episode, about a 10-minute clip on kind of conservation needs, and I wonder, well, I don't know. I mean, that was an SVOD platform, but it could be that they're going for the younger generation.
But in the same time, the Blue Planet 2 claims like the biggest impact in behavioral change of society in regards to plastic and stuff like this. Also, another film that I was absolutely just, amazed by was called Domain. It's a French word, domain, or tomorrow in English. And I thought that was a perfect example of how you create a conservation storytelling that's not all doom and gloom. Because I think where the problem is, if we're talking about the problems and the doom and gloom should only be a little part of the story and of the film, and then you just give solutions. This is what people do here, this is what people do there, this is what we've done already and the results that it brought, so that you leave people uplifted and you leave people just wanting to be part of this positive change. I think that was a problem, that a lot of the conservation content at first came out as all just like terrifying and upsetting and doom and gloom. But yeah, I do believe that we should be putting out this content, but with lots of positive solutions.
Just to spin back to a question by Lucy, you said at the start a lot of work is contract work. Do companies advertise for contract jobs, or do they tend to hire someone already in their network / on their books?
I would say that definitely positions get filled internally first, but obviously if that's how it works in the BBC, that's how it works in the Indies. You would first look to fill in the position with someone who's already there. But that happens when you, for example, have a researcher coming, free from a contract, and then there's another researcher contract or AP or the same for whatever. But if there isn't a suitable person in a company, then obviously they'll advertise and they'll open up the position to people outside.
What does work entail as a shooting researcher?
Right.
Off events, what do you do? You can maybe integrate like what a typical day looks like and what you'll be out and around doing.
Yeah, I was looking at that question. What might a typical day look like at Off the Fence? The office days are really not that exciting. I'll be honest with you guys. So I mean, it could be, I guess. It's funny because you have to go. So you've got this like path that's considered a classic path or route to go through, which is first you do the work experience, and then you're a runner, and then you go either into junior researching, or you go into the tech assistant. So either you're the edit assistant or you're the production technical assistant, and it depends on the company. So obviously, like in Off the Fence, I've been very lucky that I could have been a shooting researcher, which is something that, for example, at Icon wasn't a possibility. So when I first spoke to people at Icon about what I wanted to do, they were quite clear that they've got this division, and it was the production technical assistants that were doing any kind of kit work and camera work and everything to do with that. And the researchers were obviously just focusing on the research, and maybe every now and again they'd go on a recce, and that would be cool. So I'm really grateful that I found a company that actually allowed me to be a shooting researcher, which is something that I wanted to do, because I don't consider myself very technical. Like obviously I've got my own equipment, but I'm not necessarily very proficient in all like the super professional standard kind of industry equipment. And so what you do is, I'm just going to look at my points now. First of all, you're involved in all stages of production. So you're involved in the pre-production, then you're involved in the production, which is like the shoot, whether you're on the shoot or not on the shoot. And then obviously there's post-production. So in pre-production, you would be finding stories, you would be finding locations, you would be finding contributors, you would potentially be looking for crew members or, cameramen, or potential archive sources. So obviously there is quite a few roles that you might see that are purely an archive researcher, and for me it was an entry point to the researching world. These are probably maybe the roles that not everyone wants to take, but I think there's going to be more and more of them as the companies do more and more shows just based on archive. So as an archive researcher, you would definitely be responsible for finding archive, whether it is libraries like Getty Images or Pond5 or Framepool or nature footage. These are the ones that I know of that we use. Obviously we source a lot from the BBC, and that's sort of like you kind of go through the BBC library, so you kind of you're the company that you work for, I guess, has a contact that sets you up with an account, and then you research BBC library. But also you would search for independent cameramen that can provide you with the archive footage that they already have. Not all the cameramen have their footage on these libraries online that I've told you about. And then obviously you manage this archive footage regardless of whether you're an archive researcher or just a normal researcher. It's very likely that the program you're working on is not completely originally shot, so it's highly likely that a lot of the footage is going to come from archive. So obviously you manage that. I am quite particular about how I like to organize my things, because that's how you manage archive is going to greatly impact the post-production process and flow between your producer and the post team. So I like to download everything to my drives that I have, and then just feed it to the producer or to the edit once I've done that, so that I have a full compact library of whether they're previews or masters. Very often you work with previews first, and then you order masters after the cut is completed, after the picture log. So it's good to build that habit of managing the files, having a good naming convention. Always include the source of I think that's the most important thing. Always include the source of your archive material. And if you're getting a clip that has a particular name from your source, whether it's a cameraman or whether it's a channel or whatever, never delete that name, because that name has probably some sort of identification number that then they will be able to use to find the master file for you. So always, I would say, keep a source and then keep the whatever file name that they gave you the file with. So that's okay. So pre-production, finding stories, locations, contributors, crew on archive sources, then setting up shoots. So you've obviously found your location, you found your story, and then you basically so the production manager will do all the finalizing bits like payments and sending out call sheets and stuff like this, but you will be the one who will be arranging the timings, who will be arranging the details in terms of like who will meet when, and things like that. So obviously you kind of participate with your assistant producer or producer to do that, but you will be setting up the details of the shoot. Then obviously you might be going on the shoot, and you might be assisting on location, whether it is just assistance and just doing release paperwork. So you need talent releases for any contributors that you'll interview, or you will need location releases for any locations that you will film in. And it's down to you to make sure that after the cameraman has finished filming, you then go and you take the release. It can get really hectic when you're doing stuff on the street. So for example, one show can be really challenging, or any kind of production that involves doing some vox pops outside on the street, and then you're running around, we're like, please get inside. So that can be quite fun. Then you might be doing some logging as well. Obviously it's good to build some sort of habit of the naming conventions and how to log. Obviously there's some specific programs that some companies use, so obviously that means offloading the files from the SD cards or whatever cards, camera cards, renaming them appropriately, then logging them into the rushes logs and stuff. Then, as I said, obviously managing archive, and then as we go into post-production, you would be fact-checking the scripts. You might be doing some transcribing as well. I find that it's usually runners that do transcribing, but if it's an archive show, the producer might need you to do a lot of transcribing of the archive material that you found. So that can be quite daunting. But so you would do the fact-checking, and fact-checking basically you base around scientific papers, around reputable websites, different encyclopedias, and experts. So obviously, if you can find something in a scientific paper, that would be preferable. But I find that, for example, I'm not sure about the BBC Natural History production, but I worked in BBC, daytime unscripted, and they were fine with other sources. Just, I don't know whether it's travel websites and stuff like this. You know, if it's animals, then it could be Wildlife Trust websites, it could be the Mammal Society, that kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be the scientific paper. You can look for the information on websites like that. Then material releases and licenses. So obviously you ordered your screeners or your previews from whatever cameraman you've contacted, and then it comes to a moment that you have, so you go for the rough cut, then you've got the fine cut, and then you've got picture log. Usually after fine cut you get a pretty good idea. This is usually when you submit your annotated script. And by fine cut you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to be using from your archive. So by that point it's a very good habit to let your cameraman know, because after picture log there is a very, very short window for inserting the master files. So if you leave it for too long, people might struggle, especially if they're cameramen who are constantly out on location and stuff like this. They will need at least a week to go through their files and send you their masters. So it's a good habit to do your archive summary after the fine cut and start sending out master requests then. And then you get your masters, you get them logged nicely in whatever system you've got going on your drives, and then you feed them to your edit assistant team, who will then put it into the cut. Then you'll obviously be signing material releases with these cameramen once you've ordered the masters. So obviously you might negotiate rates. So how I find it happens is I'm the point of contact, but I'm obviously constantly in touch with my PM, and I'm asking, is this okay? Is this rate okay? What is the rate that you are hoping for? So it's constantly a discussion between me and my PM, but then I'm the one negotiating with the cameramen about their rates. And it helps to be bold sometimes or whatever, because obviously if you can ask for a discount, your PM will love it. Or if there have been some flaws, obviously people are very keen to charge you a high amount, but for example they provided masters that were faulty, or the whole process was like a massive pain because they couldn't find, I don't know, I had the situation where literally the channel was licensing footage. They didn't know where the footage came from. They didn't know how much they can license it for. And they were giving us this like really, really high amount that they wanted to license it for. And the same, some masters just came in the wrong format and all of that. So perhaps maybe that's when you can play and be like, whoa, it wasn't all that smooth. So how about a discount there? And then obviously you're kind of, it depends, I guess, whether you're an archive researcher or sometimes it will be your PM that will be doing the totals. If it's an archive show, then obviously it's a task to calculate the totals of all the archive and the sources that it came from and all of that. So you might be helping your PM with that, and that's a lot of Excel spreadsheets and EDLs and that kind of stuff. So EDL is a file that basically that you can convert into a Microsoft Excel format that gives you a list of every single clip that was used on the timeline in the whether it was Premiere or Avid in the cutting software, and you can see second by second, frame by frame, what clips, where they came from. And this is where your naming convention comes to play. How you've named your clip, that way it will appear on the EDL. So this is where you want to see the source so that you can then catalog it by source, and okay, so this many seconds from that source, these many seconds from that source. So that helps. then you might be doing some time coding but your main task is the annotation of the scripts, and there's a whole process. I'm not sure how it looks like in other companies. I work on documentaries that are being made for National Geographic. So the system with them is you send them a script upon fine cut, and then a person on their side from their research team, like their research manager, goes through it and basically highlights any things that they have problems with, or that they think they might need further annotations for, or that they think the line doesn't quite work and needs changing. And it's basically like a back and forth kind of process where you send them a script, they send you the script. Obviously at that point the script has already changed because that was a fine cut, and then you have picture log. Your producer has a completely different conversation going on with their commissioner or exec or whoever from Nat Geo. So they've been modifying the script according to the comments that they got from the Nat Geo, and you've got the comments from the research Nat Geo team, and it's a constant work between you and your producer on what you can and can't say, how to change the lines and stuff like this. And then finally you get the final approval from the channel. It's all okay, and then you get it ready for the com record. You need to time code it and make sure that it's all ready for the com record.
I've got a question. Just a lot of us, you asked at the beginning, you weren't sure. I don't know for sure, but a lot of us do come from biological backgrounds and did our degrees in the biology, zoology, marine biology field.
Yeah.
And when I think of research, like you said, there's a lot of proofreading where you don't necessarily have to find the scientific paper that published it. Like, how often has there ever been a time where you've been scrutinized by a viewer saying that's not the case, and it goes back to the researcher, or like how vigilant do you have to be that what you're telling your audience is 100% verified, and how many sources back it up?
Oh yeah, everything needs to be verified, except that you can frequently find that whether it's a published research paper or not, different sources will give you a different information. So really, you can tailor it. So I found some sources that were speaking against what the producer said in the script, but I found some sources that were speaking in favor of it. So then I just used the ones that are in favor of it. And since it's a reputable source, I'll just leave it at there. But I found that with some sources, the research manager came back and said, the source is not good enough, or I found this source and it says that. So, and then it's just kind of, I guess, how you justify it. As long as you obviously, it's not like you can't say something that's not true. But if you're saying something that, if you're just treating it, we had this case with like marmots, alpine marmots, and the producer said that, marmots are living in these like social clusters, which are mainly family, but not all of them are family, but they're also inbreeding. So like, the fact that they're family doesn't really mean that they can't mate together. And we had this sequence where we said, where the producer said, there is this helper who helps to get the burrow ready for the female, but he's only a helper and he'll never mate with her, something like that. And the research manager wasn't quite happy with this. She said, but it doesn't sound right because this is probably her offspring. And then it's kind of like, and then twisting it and then coming back with a source that says they're not all siblings, they're not all offspring. It's kind of like this constant what you can justify and what you can't justify. So there are certain things that you will be able to justify, and there's some things that you just won't. And there's a lot of things that so producers will want to include a lot of hard facts, like a lot of percentages, a lot of numbers, a lot of this and that. And I find that sometimes it's really hard to find the exact number that they're after. Or even, I find that sometimes they just come up with this number by themselves. So they're just writing a script and I don't have time to check something. So they'll just write whatever number. And you didn't know. And then you check, hey, I can't find the source for that. And they say, oh, I just made it up, So that's when you find yourself in the situation where you're like, I really can't find support for this. So we really can't say that. So we really need to go more vague. And I guess the going more vague is a solution for many things. When the producer said something like, this many percent or that much, that many kilometers, then you just revert to saying almost, over, nearly, you know, things like that. Instead of saying that 20% of the animals didn't survive, you say a handful didn't survive because you can't find the exact reference for the 20%.
You see it in, I think, didn't David Attenborough get in trouble once to the BBC for like anthropomorphizing the animals by saying like they feel happy or they feel like they're having a good time.
Yeah.
And giving them sort of human emotions which you can't really comment upon. So I think now he says it's somewhat like they're having a dance or something. Like I think they have to be more careful now than they used to be.
Yeah.
You commented a little bit about your involvement of luck. And you've also talked a little about his work experience and necessary path.
Yeah.
Here we go. So you spoke a little bit how you do some of your own shooting. And I've got a question here, which is, how much time did you commit to making and perfecting your show reel for your career?
Yeah. Yes, so I think showreel is a very, very important thing. It's like your business card, but it's more important. I don't know how much time I've spent on it. I actually quite enjoy editing, so I spend lots of time doing it. But so it was something that I enjoyed doing it, and I was making it until I was happy with it, or happy that it was, worth showing to someone. I definitely strongly advise having a show reel, especially if you're interested in camera work. That is, a must-have. I think that was an advantage for me because there are people in the company that I work in that were there longer than me and are on a higher position than me, but they didn't end up going on the shoot because they kind of like, they don't own their own equipment, and they kind of like didn't really put themselves forward for it. So having a showreel and bombarding people saying, this is what I've done, I'm a shooter, I operate these cameras, I can do this, I've got a drone license. People know that then you will be capable of. So for me, when I got my first shooting researcher role, it wasn't a problem when they just asked, can you operate FS7? And at this point I could, even though I didn't do a hell of a lot of work with it, but I've done enough to say, fine, I'm okay to go and do it, because even though I haven't done so much work with FS7, I've been shooting regularly several times a month with my own equipment. So it's getting this confidence, because every camera in the end of the day, the principle is the same. You might need to get accustomed to the menu, but the principle is the same. So you getting used to operating the focus ring, or you getting used to setting your settings is basically the same. I was just going to come back to the question that said, how much time do you spend on shoot in comparison to the office? I think when I was talking about managing your expectations, that's also another thing. The production, the production process is predominantly pre-production and post-production, and I think it's important to understand that shoots are a fraction of it. So you will, if you are a researcher, you will predominantly be in the office, and the shoots are few weeks. If a production takes a year, then the shoots take maybe a month. So that's the kind of, and obviously it depends whether you will be sent on that shoot. So it depends. If you're in the PTA department, again, as I spoke about the different companies and stuff like this, then you're likely to go on many more. Like Plimsoll has that, Icon has that, where you're in the technical department, and these are the people that specialize in kit and equipment, and they will be sent to locations on various productions. But if you're a researcher, you're assigned to one production, and then perhaps maybe you get to go on the shoot that's for that production.
My question was, some of us are thinking of going, some of us are thinking about going down craft and being like camera operators, and then some of us are thinking about going down production and being runners to junior researchers, what have you. And it seems from what you're saying that even if you're going down the production side of things, always show a show reel and kind of say that you've got like all things in hand as well. Is there anything like if you're going down the craft idea of being a camera operator, to say that you've got research skills? Like, is that something that would be applicable to both, or is it kind of more if you're going down production question. It's good to know that you can do a camera.
No, I don't think it really matters the other way. I think predominantly if you're, when I said about being a jack of all trades and it being useful to, when you're a researcher, then definitely talk about your camera operator skills, sound operating skills. But I think if you're just going into the craft side of things, I don't really think the research will matter that much. I think it's basically, so obviously if you're the tech department, definitely have a showreel. When you're a researcher, definitely still have a showreel, because it's the showreel is not just for camera operators. The showreel is also for presenters. The showreel is for producers. So producer directors will have their showreels. So it's worth to have it, even if you want to go that route, assistant producer, director. It's still worth to have a showreel, especially when you get to work on big productions, and then you can actually put them in your showreel.
Cool. The next question I have, which you might not have the answer for, but you can give us an idea, is what do you think it was that got you your position off the fence? And sort of
Yeah, I did write something for it. So, where is it? Oh, I lost it. Oh, yes. So I think it all comes down to my whole path in the industry. And my path was so that I did, I got my first job in a post-production house. And after that, I got myself a work experience at Icon. And after that, having performed well at work experience at Icon, I got a job at Icon as a runner. Then I did a lot of work as a runner, but in different areas of the industry and companies. So I did some factual entertainment, I did some light entertainment, I did some commercial work. So I got a lot of experience in many different areas of the industry. And having a vast experience as a runner, I then applied for a runner role on Doctor Who in Cardiff in the BBC. And so they loved that I had such vast experience as a runner. At the time I was actually getting quite upset that I'm spending a lot of time being a runner. And so they loved it. The only thing that for them was an issue was the fact that I'm interested in natural history and not in Doctor Who and drama. So they said that they employed someone who is interested in drama and Doctor Who, but they can't start until then. So would you like to fill in that 2-week contract for them? And so I absolutely did, because that would be my first BBC credit. And after I've done that, I was kind of in the process of getting another job lined up in Cardiff. And then as we were talking about networking, I did several projects and, the Natural History Network and all of that. And I met the talent manager from the BBC in Bristol several times and sent her several emails. So at this point, she knew me. And then I sent her another email saying, "Hi, Sass, I just got my first credit in the BBC. I worked on Doctor Who." And then she got me in for Countryfile Diaries in Bristol. And then that's a really solid credit. So Countryfile Diaries, it's not natural history, but it's like countryside affairs and all of that, and it's lots of nature and all of that. So at that, and obviously you go a lot on shoots, so there's a lot of research. You've got the big name of the BBC, you've also operated sound and all of that. So I think then having this credit of the Countryfile Diaries, that was, I think, a pivotal point for me getting a job at Off the Fence. And when I was saying that I'm not sure about the recommendations, I know that Sass, who is a talent manager, also maintains regular relationships with indies and people in indies around Bristol. So it might have been that she has mentioned my name or that she has recommended me. But I also think that when I went for an interview, I just had a really, really good interview, like a really genuine, nice conversation with the creative director at Of the Fence. And so he said, I interviewed for something else. And he said, well, you might not get this one, but we do a lot of natural history. Actually, what I was interviewing for was a natural history. And then I got a call back 2 weeks after from them for a different project. So it's a mix of things. It's a mix of your experience. It's a mix of your connections and contacts. It's a mix of having a solid credit on your CV and coming across well on an interview.
Yeah, a lot for us is just getting that foot in the door, that we're finding is the sort of the one thing that'll be the turning point of getting work that then leads on to other work that leads on to other work that might lead on to like better work. Did you find that the case, that once you got through that first hurdle of getting some credits, it was easier to get more work along the way?
There was a question, is it worth going with the work experience? I'm on my example, work experience was what made it for me. So obviously, like, it could either be the work experience way, because it is highly likely that if you've done a work experience for the company and you came out well, you are likely to get a job in this company after. So I got offered a job at Icon after having done the work experience with them like a few months after. Off the Fence does the same. They had a guy on work experience, and the One Show needed someone. So the One Show and the Country File and Country File Diaries, these are the types of productions that you should be looking out for, because these are the productions that need low budget. They need people all the time, and you can progress quickly, and obviously that's a solid credit for you on your CV. So these are the productions that you should be looking for. Look for production companies that are doing the One Show, and obviously try and apply for Country File and Country File Diaries. So these are the good points. Another places to start in, especially if you're more technical, are the post-production houses. Evolutions, Films at 59, Doghouse. If you can get a job as a runner there, especially Films at 59 and probably Evolutions as well, but Films at 59 is in the same building as a lot of different production companies, small indies. So you will just, as a runner, you will get to interact with people from that production company. And I know not one person who got the job in the production company, in the tech department, starting as a runner at Films at 59.
Thank you, that was really interesting and actually really helpful. I've written down a lot there.
Cool.
The next question I want to jump to, just because we've only got 10 minutes left, you're willing to give to a company so to secure a place in the team. I've had some people in the past say, have 5 ideas of your work that you feel happy giving to other people, and it will stand you in good stead. I just wonder what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so with that, it's definitely good to have ideas. Obviously, like, I found that when you're a runner, people are not necessarily treating you that seriously yet. So when you're just starting out and you're just bombarding people with ideas, they're not necessarily gonna like take that seriously. So, and then another flip side to it is you might tell someone your idea, and then they might take it and buy credit to you and all of that kind of stuff. So there are two sides of things. I remember sharing an idea with the development team at Icon, and we had a meeting, and they kind of said, yeah, great idea, and they kind of forgot about it. And that's when I said, what they don't really treat it that seriously, unless you're doing a work experience or like doing a short contract specifically in development. Then that's a good time for you to start throwing ideas, because that's what you're being paid for. That's what your role entails. But I probably wouldn't necessarily go around and like talk about your ideas to everyone. Festivals are good places to potentially discuss them. If you find a good partner, if you find a potential employer or whatever, if they're looking for that, then that's a good place to talk about ideas. This is basically what happens on festivals is, production companies send their people and they talk to the commissioners and they share the ideas and all of that. I found that the idea that I had at Icon that got kind of dismissed when I went to Off the Fence, which was 3 years later, actually the development team liked it, and now they wanted me to develop it. The upside of having an idea and getting the development team of the company that you work in interested is that you can secure yourself a potential contract. So what happened with me is I was quite passionate about trying to get the natural history filmmaking industry interested in Eastern Europe and Poland, where I come from. So on the festival, actually, I was chatting to Andrew Jackson, who I knew you spoke to. He had a panel on the Wild Screen. It was with a few other people, and amongst all, there was a commissioner from Nat Geo Wild. And so at the end, there was a Q&A, and I asked, if it's a panel about getting your production done cheaply, why isn't there more productions done in Eastern Europe? Why do you send crews somewhere so far away that's so unsustainable and so expensive? Why don't you go and, you know, film the charismatic fauna that's in Eastern Europe and that's, you know, so accessible? And everyone was just kind of like, yeah. And I guess, and the Nat Geo Wild commissioner kind of said, oh, I'm sure we have some. And I kind of got dismissed. And then right after, you know, like a few months after, I wrote a pitch of the fence, and it was for Nat Geo Wild. And I wonder whether it's my words that perhaps lingered in her head, but the idea got commissioned and I secured a contract. So for myself for another year and a half or whatever. And from what the boss, you know, the managing director at my company said, because she was the one I was liaising with about the ideas, she said, you know, it's something that you do in your spare time. It's not like no one's gonna like give you extra time to write ideas. It's whatever, you know, you have an idea, you just write it up in your spare time whenever, whether it's at work or not. And then if it gets commissioned, obviously you can become very popular at work and all of that. But it's just something that is kind of like a side job, is your extracurricular.
I have one more question, but I'm going to open it up to anyone in the class that has a question, because in the 4 minutes that we have left, we'll see if anyone else has a question they'd really like to get out before we run out of time again.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Oh, good. Everyone's so hot, I bet.
Everyone has the answers to their questions. You've done so well. The last one is just looking to the future. Do you have any advice for students post-COVID looking to get into the industry? I'm sure COVID's done us no favors, so...
Do you know, it's hard for me to say because I just don't know. I guess we don't know yet what this is gonna... how this is gonna impact the industry. I mean, as I said, we haven't really felt the impacts because we kept on ticking with work. I guess, you know, the problem will be with the work experience, because the work experience is the most disposable, so there might be less work experience available. So maybe start applying now and contacting the companies and find out what will be feasible. The only lesson that I would say for the future that I have learned from COVID, and unfortunately I haven't learned the hard way, is when you can be on payroll, because if you're a freelancer, then you're screwed. And and like at Off the Fence have been lovely, because even with freelancers, you know, everyone has been kept. No one's being like, but there were companies that were ruthless. They just fired people on the spot. And as a freelancer, obviously you didn't have any government support, no nothing. So when a company asks you, do you want to be a freelancer or payroll? I always say payroll. At least now. I know that as a freelancer you can charge more, or that's the idea, but the being on payroll comes with benefits. So that's my advice.
Thank you. And I've got 2 minutes to just say thanks very much. I found this really, really helpful, especially for us looking to go down the production route. Like we said at the beginning, it's all well and good having the guys at the top telling us all the amazing thing that Plimsoll are doing, but to have someone on the ground, as you would say, give us some really good insights. And yeah, you've given us a lot of information. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks all of you for listening.